I was home alone the night I learned that some doors aren't meant to keep things out. They're meant to keep things in. It happened 3 weeks after I moved into my grandmother's old house in rural Pennsylvania. The place had been sitting empty for almost 2 years after she passed, and I got it for next to nothing. Sure, it needed work. The floors creaked, the windows were drafty, and the basement smelled like damp concrete and rust. But it was mine, and I was determined to make it feel like home. The basement door was one of those heavy wooden ones from the 1940s, the kind you don't see anymore. It had this old manual latch on the outside, just a simple metal hook that you had to lift to open it. No lock, no automatic mechanism. You had to physically unlatch it from the hallway side to get down there. I'd been down to the basement maybe 4 or 5 times since moving in, mostly to check the water heater or throw some boxes in storage. It was unfinished, just bare concrete walls, exposed pipes, and a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Not a place I wanted to spend much time in. That Tuesday night, I was upstairs in the kitchen making dinner when I heard it. A heavy, solid slam that shook the floor beneath my feet. I froze, the knife in my hand hovering over the cutting board. The sound had come from the hallway, from the basement door. I walked slowly toward the hallway, my heart already starting to pick up speed. The basement door was shut, completely closed. I stood there staring at it for a long moment, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. There was no wind in the house, no draft strong enough to slam a door that heavy, and even if there had been, the door opened inward toward the basement stairs. It couldn't just swing shut on its own. I reached for the latch and tried to lift it. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, and that's when my stomach dropped. The latch was down, locked, from the inside. That's impossible, I thought. The latch was on my side of the door. You couldn't lock it from the basement. There was no mechanism, no way to do it. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Nothing. Just silence. Cold, heavy silence. I went back to the kitchen, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the latch had just gotten stuck. Old house, old hardware. These things happen. But my hands were shaking as I stirred the pasta, and I kept glancing back toward that hallway. Then I heard the scratching. It was faint at first, like nails dragging slowly across wood. My breath caught in my throat. I turned off the stove and stood perfectly still, listening. The scratching stopped. Then it started again, louder this time, deliberate. It was coming from the other side of the basement door. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, my pulse pounding in my ears. I crept back toward the hallway, the light shaking in my hand. The scratching continued, rhythmic and persistent, like something was clawing its way up the stairs on the other side. "Hello?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. The scratching stopped. I stood there, frozen, staring at that door. And then I heard it. A knock. Not loud, but clear. 3 slow, muffled knocks from the basement. My entire body went cold. I took a step back, my mind racing. There was no one down there. There couldn't be. I hadn't heard anyone break in. The basement had one tiny window, rusted shut and covered with decades of grime. No one could have gotten in. I forced myself to speak louder. "Who's there?" Silence. Then the door handle started to turn. I watched in horror as the old brass knob rotated slowly, deliberately from the other side. It twisted all the way to the right, stopped, then twisted back to the left. Someone, something was testing it, trying to get out. I don't know what came over me, but I lunged forward and grabbed a screwdriver from the side table. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I wedged it under the latch and pried with everything I had. The metal groaned and bent, but finally, the latch popped free. I yanked the door open, the screwdriver raised like a weapon, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The basement was empty. I stood at the top of the stairs, shining the light down into that cold concrete space. Nothing. No one. just the water heater humming in the corner and that single bulb swaying slightly overhead. I forced myself to walk down the steps, checking every corner, every shadow. The small window was still shut, still covered with grime. No footprints in the dust, no signs anyone had been down there. I was about to go back upstairs when I noticed it. The latch. I walked back up and examined it closely under the light. The metal was bent, warped inward toward me, like something was pushing against it from below with enough force to twist solid steel. I moved out the next morning, didn't even pack everything, just grabbed what I needed and left. I never told anyone the real reason why. What would I even say? That something in my grandmother's basement wanted out? That it knew I was up there alone and it was strong enough to bend metal? I drive past that house sometimes. It's been sitting empty again for months now, and every time I do, I can't help but wonder if that basement door is still closed, if the latch is still bent, and if whatever was down there is still waiting. I started counting the basement stairs the night I realized something else was counting them too. It was supposed to be a simple renovation job. I'd bought this 1970s split level in Ohio for cheap, planning to flip it. The basement was unfinished but had good bones, just needed some drywall, better lighting, and a fresh coat of paint. The wooden stairs leading down were original to the house, and they creaked like hell. 13 steps total. I'd gone up and down them maybe 100 times in the first 2 weeks, and I'd counted them so many times I could do it in my sleep. 13. Always 13. The first time I heard it, I thought it was an echo. I was heading down to the basement around 11 at night, carrying my toolbox. The stairs groaned under my weight. 1, 2, 3, 4. Normal. But then, just as I hit the 5th step, I heard it. Another creak, behind me. Like someone was following, stepping on the 4th stair just as I moved to the 5th. I stopped and turned around, my heart jumping. The stairwell was empty, just the door standing open at the top, light from the kitchen spilling down. I stared up at those stairs for a long moment, then shook my head. Old house, settling wood, nothing weird about that. I kept going. 6, 7, 8, and there it was again. Another creak, perfectly timed, 1 step behind mine. I spun around faster this time, and the sound stopped. The stairs were empty, silent. My hands were sweating as I gripped the railing. I forced myself to continue down. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. As soon as my foot hit the concrete floor, I heard one final creak from above, the 13th step. Like something had followed me all the way down and was now standing at the bottom of the stairs behind me. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, my toolbox hanging from my white-knuckled grip, staring straight ahead at the concrete wall. The basement was dead quiet, except for the sound of my own breathing. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly turned around. Nothing. Just the empty staircase leading back up. I told myself I was tired, working too many late nights. My mind was playing tricks on me. But the next evening, I decided to test something. I stood at the top of the stairs and started counting out loud as I walked down. 1. My voice echoed in the stairwell. I stepped down. The stair creaked. 2. Another step. Another creak. 3. I paused, listening. Silence. I took a breath and continued. 4. And then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, coming from somewhere in the stairwell below me. 5. My blood ran cold. That wasn't my voice. It was quieter, raspier, like someone with a dry throat trying to speak. I stood frozen on the 4th step, my hand gripping the railing so hard my knuckles went white. Hello? My voice cracked. No response. Just that heavy, waiting silence. I swallowed hard and took another step. 6. I said, my voice shaking now. Creak. My foot on the sixth step. Then another creak. Below me. And that whisper again, closer this time. 7. I hadn't taken the 7th step yet. Whatever was counting was ahead of me now. Panic flooded my system. I turned and ran back up the stairs, my feet pounding on the wood. I counted them without meaning to, 5 steps back up to the landing. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it, my heart hammering against my ribcage. I didn't go back down for 3 days. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the stress of the renovation was getting to me. But I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, that whisper counting ahead of me. On the 4th night, I couldn't sleep. It was 2 in the morning, and I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when I heard it, from downstairs, through the floorboards, creaking, slow, methodical creaking, like someone walking up the basement stairs, and with each creak, that whisper, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. I sat up, my entire body rigid with fear. 5, 6, 7, 8. The footsteps were getting closer, coming up from the basement. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The creaking stopped. Breathing was louder now, like whatever was out there was standing right outside my bedroom door. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I didn't know who to call. What would I even say? The counting stopped at 16. The house went completely silent. I sat there in the dark for hours, too terrified to move, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. When the sun finally came up, I worked up the courage to open my bedroom door. The hallway was empty. I crept downstairs and stood in front of the basement door, pressing my ear to it. Silence. I opened it slowly and looked down. The staircase was empty. Morning light filtered through the small basement window, illuminating the wooden steps. They looked completely normal. I counted them as I walked down, my legs shaking with each step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 steps. I stood at the bottom, my breath coming in short gasps. The stairs had changed. There were 3 extra steps now, steps that hadn't existed before. I ran back up, counting again. 16. I counted them 5 more times. Always 16. I left that house the same day, didn't even bother listing it. I just walked away. 2 months later, I drove past it out of morbid curiosity. A sold sign was in the yard. A young couple was moving boxes in through the front door, laughing about something. I almost stopped, almost warned them. But what would I say? Instead, I just kept driving, trying not to think about those stairs, trying not to wonder how many steps they'll count the first time they go down to the basement, or how many steps will be there the next time. The smell hit me the second I opened the front door. Sharp, chemical, overwhelming, like someone had dumped an entire bottle of bleach down there. I had inherited the house from my uncle 3 months ago. He'd lived alone for years before the stroke took him, and the place had been sitting empty ever since. I was finally getting around to sorting through his things, deciding what to keep and what to throw out. The house was exactly as he'd left it, dusty, cluttered, untouched. No one had been inside except me and the lawyer who'd handed over the keys, so the smell didn't make any sense. I stood in the entryway, my nose burning from the fumes. It was coming from downstairs, from the basement. That thick, sterile scent of industrial cleaner, the kind that makes your eyes water. I hadn't been down there yet, had been putting it off, actually. My uncle had used the basement for storage, and I wasn't looking forward to sorting through decades of junk. But now I had to go down there. I found the basement door in the hallway and pulled it open. The smell intensified immediately, pouring up the stairwell like a wave. I covered my nose with my sleeve and flicked on the light switch. The bulb at the bottom flickered once, twice, then held. The wooden stairs creaked as I descended, each step releasing a small cloud of dust into the air. It didn't make sense. If someone had been down here cleaning recently, why was there still dust on the stairs? When I reached the bottom and looked around, my confusion only deepened. The basement was exactly as I remembered it from my one quick look-through 3 months ago. Boxes stacked against the walls, old furniture covered in sheets, my uncle's ancient workbench in the corner. Everything covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, except the floor. The concrete floor was spotless, not just clean, immaculate. It gleamed under the dim light, still slightly damp in places, and the smell was coming from it, so strong down here I could barely breathe. Someone had scrubbed this floor recently, maybe within the last few hours. My heart started beating faster. I pulled out my phone and dialed my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She'd been watching the place for me, checking on it every few days. "Mrs. Chen, did you go into the basement recently, or did you hire someone to clean?" "The basement? Honey, I haven't been down there. I just peek in through the windows like you asked. Why?" I told her about the smell, about the floor. There was a long pause on the other end. "You should call someone," she said quietly. "That's not right." I hung up and looked around more carefully. That's when I noticed the plastic sheets. They were folded neatly and stacked on the workbench, the kind of thick painter's plastic you'd use to cover floors. They hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. The workbench had been cluttered with old tools and paint cans. Now it was cleared off, and these plastic sheets were sitting there like someone had just finished using them. My hands were shaking as I walked over to examine them. They were new. The plastic was still crisp, not yellowed with age. And when I lifted the top sheet, I saw stains. Dark, rust-colored stains that the plastic had somehow absorbed. I dropped it immediately and backed away, my mind racing. Someone had been in this house, in this basement, using plastic sheets and industrial cleaner. The implications made my stomach turn. I was about to run back upstairs when I noticed the drain. It was in the center of the floor, one of those old-fashioned basement drains with a metal grate. I'd barely registered it before, but now I couldn't look away from it. The grate was clean, too clean, and there was water around the edges like someone had just used it, recently. I knelt down, even though everything in me was screaming to get out of there. I shined my phone's flashlight through the grate. The pipes below were wet, glistening. And there was something else, something dark caught in the grate itself, stuck between the metal bars. I reached down with a tissue and pulled it free. It was a clump of hair, long, dark hair, human hair. That's when the lights went out. The basement plunged into complete darkness, and I gasped, nearly dropping my phone. The only light now was the weak glow from my screen, illuminating a tiny circle around me. I stood up fast, my legs shaking, and turned toward the stairs. Then the lights came back on. Not the dim bulb that was on before, all of them. Lights I didn't even know existed. Fluorescent tubes mounted on the ceiling that I hadn't noticed, hidden behind the exposed beams. They flickered to life one by one, flooding the basement with harsh white light that left no shadows anywhere. And in that light, I could see everything. The walls weren't just concrete, they'd been painted recently. Fresh white paint that covered old stains, stains that were bleeding through in places, dark patches that looked almost intentional, like someone had tried to cover something up but hadn't quite succeeded. The workbench wasn't just cleared off, it was organized. Tools hung on pegboard in neat rows, arranged by size. All of them clean, all of them freshly oiled. And in the corner, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a metal folding chair, sitting in the middle of a spotless section of floor, facing the drain. I didn't remember seeing that chair before. I ran. I don't remember climbing the stairs, don't remember if I locked the basement door behind me. I just remember bursting out the front door and calling 911 from my car, my whole body shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. The police came within 15 minutes. 3 officers searched the entire house, including the basement. They were down there for almost an hour. When they came back up, their faces were serious. There's no one in the house now, but someone's definitely been down there recently. They asked me questions. Had I noticed anyone watching the house, any signs of forced entry, any missing keys? I told them everything. The smell, the floor, the plastic sheets, the hair in the drain. They took samples, photographed everything, dusted for prints. The next day, a detective called me. We found trace evidence of biological material in the drain. We're running tests, but here's the thing. Whoever was down there knew what they were doing. The cleaning was thorough, professional, and there's no sign of how they got in or out. No prints, no tool marks, nothing. What does that mean? My voice sounded small. It means someone had access to your house, someone who knew you wouldn't be there, and they used that basement for something. He paused. We're going to keep an eye on the property, but I'd recommend you don't stay there, not until we figure this out. That was 6 weeks ago. The police still haven't found anyone. The locks have all been changed, security cameras installed. But the tests on the biological material came back. Human blood, type O negative, no match in any database. The house is sitting empty again. I can't bring myself to go back. Can't stop thinking about that clean floor, those plastic sheets, that chair facing the drain. Can't stop wondering who was using my uncle's basement, or what they were using it for, or if they'll come back looking for it. I thought the furnace was broken the first time I heard it talk. It was late January in Michigan, and I'd just moved into this rental house on the outskirts of Grand Rapids. The place was cheap for a reason. It was old, probably built in the 50s, and everything in it felt like it was one bad day away from falling apart. But the furnace worked, and that's all I cared about. It was one of those ancient oil furnaces in the basement, the kind that rumbles and clanks when it kicks on, making the whole house feel alive. I'd gotten used to the noise pretty quickly. The groaning of the pipes, the whoosh of hot air through the vents, the rhythmic banging that happened every time the system cycled. It was just old house sounds, nothing strange about it. Until the night I heard my own voice coming from the basement. I was sitting on the couch watching TV when the furnace kicked on with its usual mechanical groan. But this time, underneath the rumbling, I heard something else, a sound that made me grab the remote and mute the television. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakable. Words coming from the heating vents. "Weather's getting worse." My blood went cold. Those were my exact words. I'd said them out loud maybe 30 seconds earlier, commenting on the snow forecast to myself, just talking to fill the silence like I always did when I was alone. I sat perfectly still, listening. The furnace continued its normal cycle, rumble, whoosh, bang, and then fell silent. I waited for 5 full minutes, barely breathing, but heard nothing else. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. The TV had been on. Maybe I'd heard an echo, or maybe the sound had bounced weirdly through the ductwork. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next night, I tested it. I stood at the top of the basement stairs with the door open, listening to the furnace run. It was doing its usual thing, mechanical sounds, nothing unusual. I took a breath and spoke clearly into the stairwell. "Hello?" The furnace clanked and rumbled, normal sounds. I was about to close the door when I heard it. Faint, buried underneath the mechanical noise, but definitely there. Hello. My voice, distorted and metallic, like it was being played through a broken speaker, but unmistakably my voice saying the word I'd just said. My hands started shaking. I slammed the basement door and backed away, my heart pounding. That wasn't possible. Furnaces don't record voices. They don't play them back. It had to be some kind of acoustic trick, some weird resonance in the pipes. I tried to ignore it. For 3 days, I didn't say a word when the furnace was running. I kept the TV volume up, played music, anything to cover the sounds from the basement. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Couldn't stop wondering what would happen if I tried again. On the 4th night, I went down to the basement. The furnace sat in the far corner, a massive metal beast covered in rust and peeling paint. It looked like something from another era, all exposed pipes and riveted panels. I stood in front of it, watching the flames flicker through the small viewing window. The heat coming off it was intense, making sweat bead on my forehead. "What are you?" I said quietly. The furnace rumbled, whooshed, banged, and then, in that distorted, metallic version of my voice, "What are you?" I took a step back. It was clearer down here, less distorted, almost like the furnace was getting better at it. "This isn't real," I said, my voice shaking. The furnace cycled for a moment. Then, "This isn't real." I should have left, should have run upstairs and called someone, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. "Can you understand me?" I asked. Silence. The furnace rumbled. I waited, my pulse racing, and then the response came, but it wasn't an echo this time. "Yes." My legs nearly gave out. That wasn't my voice anymore. It was still metallic, still processed through whatever mechanism was creating the sounds, but it was different, deeper, more deliberate. "What are you?" I whispered. The flames flickered behind the viewing window, casting shadows across the basement walls. The furnace was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe it wouldn't answer. And then I heard it. A long, slow exhale of hot air through the vents, followed by words. "Cold, so cold, burning, always burning." I backed towards the stairs, my hands trembling. "Who are you?" I whispered. Another pause. The furnace groaned, and for a second I thought I saw something move behind the viewing window, a shadow that wasn't quite right, darker than the flames should have made it. "Forgotten, left behind, fed to the fire." My mind raced. Fed to the fire. I thought about the age of this house, about the furnace that probably been here since it was built, about all the stories you hear about old houses and the things people did in them. "I don't understand," I said. The response came faster this time, almost angry. "Burned, bones, ashes, still here, always here." I was at the base of the stairs now, ready to run. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "Help me." The voice was clearer than ever, almost human, desperate. The furnace began to rattle violently, pipes shaking, metal groaning like the whole system was about to tear itself apart. How can I help you?" "Turn it off. Let me go, please." I looked at the electrical box on the wall, at the breaker that controlled the furnace. It would be easy, just flip the switch. But it was January. It was 12 degrees outside. If I shut off the heat, "Turn it off, please." The voice was screaming now, the words echoing through every vent in the house, rattling the ductwork. I ran to the breaker and threw the switch. The furnace shuddered once, twice, and then went silent. The sudden quiet was deafening. I stood there in the dark basement, my breath forming clouds in the rapidly cooling air. It was over. Whatever had been trapped in there, I'd set it free. Then I heard it, faint at first, but growing louder, coming from the furnace, a whisper that made every hair on my body stand on end. Michael. My name. It said my name, and I'd never told it my name. Thank you, Michael. The voice was still there, still coming from the dead furnace, from the cold metal, from the dark chamber where the flames had been. But I'm not alone down here. The basement lights went out. In the pitch black, I heard it. Not from the furnace this time, from the shadows around me. Multiple voices, overlapping, all in that same distorted metallic tone. Michael, Michael, Michael. I ran. I don't remember climbing the stairs or leaving the house. I just remember being in my car, pulling out of the driveway with my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I called the landlord the next morning and broke the lease, told him the furnace was broken and I wasn't staying. He said he'd send someone to look at it. 3 days later, he called me back. Furnace is fine. Repairman said it wasn't even plugged in when he got there, but it was warm, like it had just been running. I hung up without responding. I drove past that house one last time before I left town. It was the middle of the day, bright sun, everything looking normal, but I could see the basement window, and through that window, I swear I saw the flicker of flames behind the viewing window of a furnace that wasn't connected to any power. I never found out what happened in that house, who was fed to that fire, how many people. But sometimes, late at night when my apartment's heating kicks on, I hold my breath and listen, just to make sure it's only mechanical sounds, just to make sure it doesn't know my name. The light in the basement wouldn't turn off, and that's how I knew something was living down there. I'd been renting this duplex in Wisconsin for about 6 months when my electric bill came back almost $300 higher than usual. My landlord suggested I check for anything running that shouldn't be, maybe a space heater I'd forgotten about or some appliance draining power. That's when I noticed it. Through the small basement window at ground level, visible from the driveway, was a light. Just a steady, dim glow coming from somewhere down there. The weird thing was, I never used the basement. It was technically part of my unit, but the stairs were steep and narrow and the door stuck badly. I'd been down there exactly once when I moved in, just long enough to see it was empty except for the water heater and some old shelving. I definitely hadn't turned on any lights. I went to the basement door in my kitchen and yanked it open. The smell hit me first. Damp concrete and something else, something stale and organic that I couldn't quite place. And there it was. Light, spilling up from the bottom of the stairs. Not bright, just enough to see by. A bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, glowing steadily in the darkness. I didn't remember that bulb being on before. I flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs. Click. Nothing changed. The light stayed on. I flipped it again. And again. The bulb just kept glowing, completely unaffected by the switch. My stomach tightened. I went to the circuit breaker in the hallway closet and found the one labeled basement. I flipped it off, walked back to the basement door. The light was still on. That's when I started to feel really uneasy. I stared down those stairs for a long time, trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe it was on a different circuit. Maybe the breaker was mislabeled. But the light just kept burning, steady and dim, casting shadows that seemed too dark for how weak the bulb was. I forced myself to go down. Each step creaked under my weight, and the smell got stronger as I descended. That stale, organic odor, like something had been sitting in stagnant water for too long. When I reached the bottom, I stood directly under the bulb and looked up at it. It was old, probably original to the house, the glass cloudy with age. But it was on. Definitely on. I reached up and tried to unscrew it. The metal base was ice cold, so cold it hurt to touch. I jerked my hand back, my fingers stinging. That wasn't right. Light bulbs got hot when they were on. Everyone knew that. But this one was freezing. I went back upstairs and called my landlord. "The basement light won't turn off," I told him. "I flipped the switch, I even cut the breaker, but it's still on." There was a pause. "That's not possible." "I know, but it is. Can you come look at it?" He said he'd send his maintenance guy the next day. I didn't want to wait that long, but I didn't know what else to do. I closed the basement door and tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. Every time I walked past that door, I felt it, that light burning down there in the darkness, waiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to get water and saw it immediately, light coming from under the basement door. But it was different now, brighter. I approached slowly and pressed my ear against the door. I could hear something, a faint electrical hum, like the sound fluorescent lights make, but deeper, pulsing. And underneath that, something else, something that might have been breathing. I grabbed the doorknob. It was cold, the same impossible cold as the light bulb. I jerked my hand back, my fingers stinging. That wasn't right. Light bulbs got hot when they were on. Everyone knew that. But this one was freezing. The light under the door flickered, once, twice. Then it flared so bright that white light poured through the crack, illuminating the entire kitchen. I shielded my eyes, stumbling backward. The humming grew louder, building to a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. Then it stopped. The light returned to normal. The humming faded. Everything was quiet again. I didn't open that door. I went back to bed and lay there with the covers pulled up to my chin, listening to the old house settle around me, waiting for morning. The maintenance guy showed up at 10. His name was Rick, and he looked like he'd been doing this job for 30 years. I explained the situation, and he nodded like he'd heard it all before. Probably just a wiring issue," he said. "These old houses, sometimes the circuits get crossed." I followed him to the basement door. He opened it without hesitation and headed down the stairs. I stayed at the top, watching. He stood under the bulb, examining it with his flashlight, even though the bulb itself was providing light. "Huh," he said. "That's strange." "What?" "This fixture. It's old, real old." He looked around the basement, his flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. "You said you cut the breaker, right?" "Yeah, the one labeled basement." He was quiet for a moment. Then he called up to me. "Cut it again, right now." I ran to the breaker box and flipped the basement breaker. Waited. Rick yelled up to me. "It's still on." My hands were shaking now. I flipped the main breaker, the one that cut power to the entire house. The refrigerator stopped humming. The clock on the microwave went dark. Every electrical device in the duplex went silent, except for the basement light. "Rick?" I called down. "Is it off?" His voice came back up, quieter now, uncertain. "No, it's getting brighter." I looked down the stairs. He was right. The light was intensifying, the bulb glowing with an intensity that shouldn't have been possible. The shadows on the basement walls were moving now, shifting and stretching in ways that didn't match Rick's position, growing darker as the light grew brighter. "Rick, get out of there!" He was backing towards the stairs, his eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. "There's something—" The bulb exploded. The sound was deafening, like a gunshot in the confined space. Rick screamed and covered his face, glass raining down on him. I ran down the stairs to help him, and that's when I realized something that made my blood freeze. The basement was still lit. Not from the bulb. That was shattered, the filament hanging in twisted fragments. But there was still light down there. A cold, pale glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the concrete, from the shadows that were now spreading across the floor like spilled ink. Rick pushed past me and ran up the stairs. I followed, and we both slammed the door behind us. He was breathing hard, picking bits of glass from his hands. "What the hell was that?" he gasped. "I don't know." He looked at me, his face pale. "I'm calling an electrician, a real one. This is beyond me. The electrician came that afternoon. His name was Dave, and he'd been doing residential electrical work for 25 years. He listened to our story with increasing skepticism, but agreed to check it out. I flipped the main breaker back on before he went down. He was in the basement for maybe 3 minutes before he came back up, his expression confused. "There's no wiring," he said. "What?" "That fixture. There's no wiring connected to it. No power source. Nothing." He showed me pictures on his phone. The fixture hanging from the ceiling, the metal base clearly visible. And he was right. No wires, no connection to anything. Just a fixture bolted to a beam, completely isolated. "That's impossible," I said. "We all saw it. It was on." "I believe you," Dave said slowly. "But I'm telling you, there's no possible way that bulb could have been receiving power. There's nothing to connect it to." Rick and I looked at each other. Neither of us knew what to say. Dave cleared his throat. "Look, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it was some kind of stored charge, or I don't know, but that fixture isn't connected to your electrical system. It never was." After they left, I stood in my kitchen staring at the basement door. The main breaker was back on. The house hummed with normal electrical sounds. Everything was fine. Except when I looked at the gap under the basement door. I could see it. Just the faintest trace of light. Dim, steady, still burning. I moved out 2 days later, broke my lease and lost my deposit, but I didn't care. Before I left, I looked through the basement window one last time. The bulb was intact, whole, glowing softly in the darkness. And underneath it, just for a second, I saw the shadow, the one that had been moving across the walls. It was standing perfectly still now, directly under the light, facing the stairs, facing where I would have been standing if I had gone back down. The new tenants moved in a week after I left. I don't know if they've noticed the light yet. I don't know if they've tried to turn it off. But sometimes, late at night, I drive past that duplex, and every single time, no matter what hour it is, I can see that pale glow through the basement window. Still burning, still waiting, still connected to nothing at all. I installed a security camera in the basement because I kept hearing noises at night. I never thought I'd regret having proof of what was down there. The house was mine for 3 months before the sounds started, always around 3 in the morning, shuffling like something being dragged across the concrete floor. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just the house settling, or maybe an animal that had gotten in somehow. But the sounds were too deliberate, too rhythmic. So I bought a cheap motion-activated camera off Amazon and mounted it in the corner of the basement, angled to cover the whole space. The app on my phone would alert me whenever it detected movement. I'd finally have an explanation. Probably just mice or my imagination making normal sounds seem worse than they were. The first alert came at 3:14 a.m. that very first night. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand, my heart already racing. The app showed a still image from the camera, the empty basement, everything exactly as I'd left it. I scrubbed through the recording. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then, at the very edge of the frame, something moved. It was fast, just a blur of motion near the old shelving unit against the far wall. The camera had only caught it for maybe 2 seconds before whatever it was moved out of frame. I watched it again and again. It looked like a shadow, but shadows don't move on their own. Shadows don't trigger motion sensors. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next evening, I adjusted the camera angle to cover more of the basement. I even went down there and walked around, testing the field of view, making sure nothing could move without being caught on camera. The basement looked normal in the daylight. Concrete floor, exposed ceiling joists, my water heater humming quietly in the corner. Nothing scary about it at all. At 3:14 a.m., My phone buzzed again. This time, the movement was clearer. Something was definitely down there. I watched the footage with my hand over my mouth, trying not to make a sound even though I was alone in my bedroom. A figure moved through the frame, not walking, gliding almost. It stayed in the shadows at the edge of the basement, carefully avoiding the area directly under the single light bulb I'd left on. I couldn't make out any details. No face, no features, just a dark shape that was roughly human-sized, moving with an unnatural fluidity from one side of the basement to the other. The footage lasted 43 seconds. Then the figure moved behind the water heater and didn't come back out. I sat up in bed, my phone clutched in both hands, waiting for another alert. Nothing came. At 6 a.m., when the sun was fully up, I finally worked up the courage to go down there and check. I searched every corner of that basement, behind the water heater, behind the shelves, in every shadow. Nothing. No one. No sign that anyone had been there at all. But I'd seen it. I had proof. I started watching the live feed obsessively. During the day, nothing ever happened. The basement just sat there, still and empty. But every night at exactly 3:14 a.m., the motion alert would trigger, and every night that figure would appear. It was getting bolder. By the fourth night, it wasn't staying at the edges anymore. It would stand in the middle of the floor, right in the center of the frame, perfectly still for minutes at a time. I still couldn't see it clearly. The camera quality wasn't great, and the lighting was dim, but I could see enough. It had a human shape, arms, legs, a head. But the proportions were wrong somehow. The limbs too long, the movements too smooth. On the fifth night, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The figure was facing the camera. Not moving, not doing anything, just standing there in the middle of the basement, its head tilted slightly upward, staring directly at the lens. It stood like that for 6 minutes and 32 seconds. I know because I watched the entire recording 3 times, checking the timestamp, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. Whatever was in my basement knew the camera was there, and it wanted me to know it knew. I should have called someone, the police maybe, or a priest, or just packed my shit and left. But I was paralyzed by the need to understand. I had to know what this thing was, what it wanted. On the 6th night, I stayed awake, watching the live feed on my phone, waiting for 3:14 a.m. When the alert came, I was ready. I watched in real time as the figure appeared in the frame, emerging from behind the shelving unit like it had been waiting there in the dark. But this time was different. The figure moved directly toward the camera, slowly, deliberately. As it got closer, I could see more details, and I wished I couldn't. Its movements were jerky now, unnatural, like a video missing frames. 1 second it was 10 feet away, the next second 5 feet, then 2. Then it was right in front of the camera, filling the entire screen. I still couldn't see its face, if it had one, just darkness where features should have been, a void shaped like a person. My phone screen went black. I thought the app had crashed, but when I reopened it, the camera was working fine. The basement was empty again. But the camera angle was different. It had been mounted in the corner, facing towards the shelving unit. Now it was facing the stairs, pointing directly at the door that led up to my kitchen. I dropped my phone. The camera had moved, or something had moved it. I ran downstairs, not caring how stupid or dangerous it was, and threw open the basement door. The light was on. I never turned it off anymore. The camera was still mounted in the corner, exactly where I'd put it, but it had been physically rotated on its bracket. Someone, something, had touched it. I was about to go back upstairs when I heard it, from the shadows under the stairs. A wet, dragging sound, like something being pulled across concrete. The sound I'd been hearing every night, the sound that had started all of this. I ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, doors locked, hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat there in my driveway as the sun came up, watching my house, trying to decide what to do. When I finally went back inside around noon, everything seemed normal. The house was quiet, still. I made myself go down to the basement one more time. The camera was still pointed at the stairs. I repositioned it, aiming it back at the shelving unit. I checked the app. Everything was working. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the live feed from 3 a.m. onward, my phone brightness turned all the way down, lying in the dark. At 3:14, the alert came. The figure appeared immediately, standing in the middle of the frame. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were others. 3, 4, I couldn't tell exactly. They moved at the edges of the frame, shapes that were almost human but not quite. Shadows that held together in the light when they shouldn't have, and they were all looking at the camera. Then, one by one, they started moving towards the stairs, towards the door, towards the part of the house where I was lying in the dark, watching them on my phone. The camera feed showed them reaching the bottom steps, climbing, 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Then the feed went black again. This time, when I checked the app, there was an error message, camera offline. I heard the footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom door. Slow, deliberate, multiple sets of them moving in perfect synchronization. They stopped right outside my door. I could see shadows moving in the gap beneath it, too many shadows for the number of footsteps I had heard. I held my breath, my phone clutched against my chest, praying they would go away. After what felt like hours, but was probably just minutes, the shadows receded. The footsteps moved away, back down the hall, back towards the basement stairs. I waited until sunrise. When I finally opened my bedroom door, the hallway was empty. I went downstairs, checked the basement. Everything was as I'd left it, except the camera was gone. The mounting bracket was still there, screwed into the ceiling joist, but the camera itself had been removed. I searched the entire basement. It was nowhere, just gone. Later that morning, I opened the security camera app to cancel my subscription and delete my account. That's when I saw the notification. All recordings manually deleted. I checked the activity log. The footage had been deleted at 4:57 a.m. from the app on my phone, the phone that had been in my hand the entire time, locked and sitting on my chest while I listened to those things walking through my house. Someone had accessed my account, deleted every video, every piece of evidence. I moved out that same day, left most of my furniture, didn't even tell the landlord why. I just broke the lease and disappeared. 3 weeks later, I got a notification on my phone, a motion alert from the security camera app, but I'd deleted my account. I'd canceled the subscription. I was helping my buddy Marcus move into his new apartment last October. It was one of those old buildings downtown, built sometime in the 1940s, all brick and high ceilings. The kind of place that looks charming in the listing photos but feels a little off once you're actually inside. We were setting up his bedroom, pushing this massive IKEA shelf against the far wall, when I heard it. A hollow sound. Not like drywall hollow, different, deeper. Marcus heard it too because he stopped mid-push and looked at me. "That's weird," he said. I knocked on the wall. Hollow. Then I knocked on the wall to the left of where we'd just pushed the shelf. Solid concrete. The whole building was concrete. I'd noticed it earlier when Marcus was trying to hang pictures in the living room and nearly broke his drill bit. "Maybe it's a utility space or something," Marcus said, already losing interest. He wanted to finish unpacking. But I couldn't let it go. I pulled the shelf back out, and that's when I noticed the marks on the floor. Fresh scratches in the dust, like someone had moved this shelf recently. but Marcus had just gotten the keys 3 days ago, and the place had been empty for months, according to the landlord. I ran my hands along the wall. It looked like concrete, painted over in that industrial gray, same as every other wall in the apartment, but when I pressed on it, I could feel a slight give. Not much, just enough to know something was wrong. "Marcus, come here." He walked over, annoyed. "Dude, we've got like 6 more boxes to... Just push on this." He did. His expression changed immediately. We spent the next 20 minutes examining that wall, and that's when I found it. A tiny gap, barely visible, running vertical about 6 feet high. Then another one, parallel to it, about 3 feet away. And along the bottom, hidden behind where the shelf had been, a third gap running horizontal. It was a door painted and textured to look exactly like the concrete wall around it. Marcus got quiet, the kind of quiet that meant he was either really curious or really freaked out, probably both. "Should we call the landlord?" he asked. "And say what? There's a secret door in your apartment?" We looked at each other. Then we started pushing on different parts of the door, trying to find a mechanism, a handle, anything. Nothing worked. Marcus went to get a crowbar from his toolbox. That's when I noticed the footprints. In the thin layer of dust on the floor, right where the shelf had been, there were footprints, fresh ones, bare feet, small, like a woman's or a kid's. They led up to the door, and then stopped. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "don't get the crowbar." But he was already coming back, metal bar in hand. He saw my face and stopped. "What?" I pointed at the footprints. He stared at them for a long moment, then at the door, then back at the prints. "Those weren't there before," he said. "I know. We should have left. We should have called the police or the landlord or just walked out and never come back. But we didn't." Marcus wedged the crowbar into the gap, and with a soft click, the door shifted inward about an inch. No lock. It had never been locked. The smell hit us first. Not rot or decay like you'd expect from a sealed room. It smelled lived in, like someone's bedroom, fabric softener and dust, and something else, something sweet that I couldn't place. Marcus pushed the door open wider. It swung smoothly, silently, like the hinges had been oiled recently. Inside was a room, maybe 10 by 10 feet, and it was furnished. There was a twin bed against the far wall, neatly made with a faded floral comforter, a small wooden dresser, a lamp on a nightstand that wasn't plugged into anything, and on the walls, dozens of photographs, all of the same apartment, Marcus's apartment. Different angles of the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom. Some of them looked old, Polaroids yellowed with age. Others looked recent, printed on regular photo paper. But it was the last wall that made my stomach drop. Photos of people, different people, all taken from inside the apartment through doorways, while they were sleeping, while they were cooking, while they were just living. I recognized one of them, a guy named David, who Marcus said lived here 2 tenants earlier. Marcus had met him once when he came back to pick up some mail that kept getting delivered to the old address. In the photo, David was asleep on the couch, the same couch that was now in Marcus's living room because it came with the apartment. "We need to leave, right now," I said. Marcus didn't argue. We backed out of the room, and he pulled the door shut. It clicked softly back into place, disappearing seamlessly into the wall. We didn't push the shelf back. We just left it pulled out and went to the building manager's office downstairs. The manager, an older woman named Helen, looked at us like we were insane when we tried to explain. She pulled out the building blueprints, originals from 1947, and spread them across her desk. "There's no room behind that wall," she said, pointing at the layout. It's the exterior wall of the building on that side. There's nothing there but 18 inches of concrete, and then outside." But we'd been in that room. We'd seen it. Helen agreed to come up with us, more to humor us than anything. When we got back to the apartment, the shelf was pushed back against the wall,
perfectly aligned, exactly where we'd originally placed it. And when we moved it again, the wall was solid. No hollow sound, no gaps, no door. Just solid concrete. Marcus broke his lease that week and moved in with me. He never went back to that apartment, not even to get his deposit. Last I heard, someone new moved in about a month later. Sometimes I think about those photographs, about how many there were, about how far back some of them dated. And I think about those footprints leading up to a door that couldn't be opened from the inside.
I bought my house last March, a foreclosure, been sitting empty for almost a year. The price was too good to pass up, even though it needed work. The real estate agent said the previous owner had just left, walked away from the mortgage, left most of their stuff, disappeared. It happens more than you'd think, she told me. The house is old, built in the 1960s with one of those ancient heating systems where all the vents connect to a central furnace in the basement. The kind with metal ducts running through the walls and floors like arteries. You can hear everything through them. Water running, doors closing 2 rooms away, conversations carrying from one end of the house to the other. I noticed the whispering about 2 weeks after I moved in. It was late, around midnight. I was lying in bed reading when I heard it coming from the floor vent near my closet. Soft, barely audible. I turned off my lamp and listened. It sounded like someone whispering, but I couldn't make out words. Just this low, breathy sound, rhythmic, almost like breathing. I got up and pressed my ear to the vent. The sound stopped immediately. I figured it was the furnace settling, air moving through old ducts, something mechanical. Old houses make noise. I went back to bed. But I heard it again the next night, and the night after that, always around midnight, always from the floor vent. And it was getting clearer. It was definitely a voice. On the 4th night, I could make out a word. Please. Just that. Whispered up through the vent. Please. My stomach went cold, but I tried to stay rational. Sound carries weird in old houses. Maybe it was a neighbor's TV, somehow traveling through shared walls or underground pipes. Maybe it was a radio station bleeding through the metal ducts. I'd heard that could happen. I went down to the basement with a flashlight. The furnace sat in the corner, ancient and hulking, with ducts spreading out like tentacles into the ceiling. Everything looked normal. Dust and cobwebs, some old boxes left by the previous owner, a water heater, nothing else. I stood there in the dark, listening. Nothing. But when I went back upstairs and got into bed, it started again. Please. Then a pause. Please help me. The voice was thin, strained, like someone who'd been calling out for a long time. It sounded young, female maybe. It was hard to tell through the distortion of the metal vent. Hello? I said, feeling insane for talking to my floor. The voice stopped. I waited, barely breathing. Then, can you hear me? Yes, I said. Who is this? Where are you? I'm down here. I'm trapped. Please, I've been here so long. Please help me. Every logical part of my brain was screaming that this was impossible, but I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator asked for my address, asked what my emergency was. I tried to explain. There's someone in my basement, someone trapped. I can hear them through the vents. 2 officers showed up 20 minutes later. They were polite, but clearly skeptical. We went through the entire basement together, moving boxes, checking behind the furnace, looking for any space large enough for a person to hide. Nothing. The basement was concrete on all sides. No crawl spaces, no hidden rooms, nowhere for someone to be. One of the officers knocked on the ducts, listening. These all lead back to the furnace. There's no space in there for a person. It's just sheet metal, 6 inches wide. They checked the vents in every room upstairs, pulling off the grates, shining flashlights inside. Empty ducts, nothing but dust and darkness. After they left, I felt stupid, embarrassed, but also relieved. Maybe I'd been half asleep, dreaming with my eyes open. Maybe the stress of the move and the renovation was getting to me. I didn't hear the voice that night. But the next night, it came back. Different this time.
Why didn't you help me? Not pleading anymore, accusatory, almost angry. I tried, I said to the vent. The police came. There's no one down there. I'm right here. I've been here the whole time. Why won't you help me? Where are you? Tell me exactly where you are. Silence. Then, come down and find me. Something in the tone made my skin crawl. It didn't sound scared anymore. It sounded patient, like it was enjoying this. I didn't go down to the basement. I turned on all the lights in my bedroom and didn't sleep. Over the next week, the voice changed. Sometimes it would beg, crying, desperate. Other times it would be calm, conversational, asking me about my day, commenting on things I'd done. You forgot to lock the back door. You left the stove on for 3 extra minutes. You look tired. It knew things it shouldn't know. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom, started camping out on the couch with the TV on all night. Then, last Thursday, I heard it from the living room vent. You can't avoid me forever. It was my voice, exactly my voice. Same inflection, same rhythm, like a perfect recording. I know you're listening. I've always been listening. I grabbed my phone and started researching the previous owner. Found an old news article from 2 years ago. Woman named Sarah Cunningham, 34, reported missing by her employer after not showing up to work for a week. Last seen at her home on Maple Street. My address. The article said police searched the home and found no signs of foul play. Her car was in the driveway, purse and phone inside the house. She'd just vanished. I called a contractor the next morning, told him I wanted every vent in the house sealed, not just covered, sealed, welded shut if necessary. He did it that afternoon, all of them, cut off the ducts, capped them with metal plates, sealed the edges. The house would be cold until I could get a new heating system installed, but I didn't care. That night was silent, completely silent. I almost slept. Then, around midnight, I heard it. From upstairs. Not from a vent, from the hallway outside my bedroom door. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the floor above me. I don't have a second floor. The footsteps stopped, right above where I was lying on the couch. Then I heard my own voice, muffled like it was coming from behind drywall. You sealed the wrong way out. I'm writing this from my car. It's been 3 days. I don't know what to do. I can't sell the house. Who would buy it? I can't go to the police. They already think I'm crazy. Last night, I drove by the house just to see if everything looked normal from outside. All the lights were on, every single one. And in the upstairs window, the window that leads to an attic space I don't have, I saw someone standing there, watching the street, waiting for me to come home.
I moved into my rental house in January, right in the middle of one of the worst cold snaps we'd had in years. The kind of cold that makes your car groan when you start it, where the wind cuts through your jacket like it's not even there. The house was cheap, and I knew why. It was old, probably hadn't been updated since the 70s, and the heating was terrible. The landlord had been upfront about it, said the furnace worked, but the place was drafty. He wasn't kidding. I could feel cold air seeping in around the windows, under the doors. I was running space heaters in every room just to keep the temperature above 60. Except the basement. I noticed it the first week. I'd gone down there to check the circuit breaker after I blew a fuse running too many heaters at once. The second I opened the basement door, I felt it. Warm air rising up the stairs. Not just warmer than the rest of the house, actually warm. Comfortable. I went down the wooden steps, and it felt like walking into a different building. It had to be at least 70 degrees down there, maybe warmer. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, confused, looking around for a space heater, a furnace vent, anything that would explain it. Nothing. Just concrete walls, a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, some old paint cans and cardboard boxes shoved in the corners. The furnace was down there, but it was one of those ancient units that barely worked, and all its ducts led upstairs anyway. I put my hand on the concrete wall, warm to the touch. That's weird, I thought. Maybe the previous tenant had insulated down here, or maybe the ground temperature was just warmer than the outside air. I didn't know enough about houses to understand it, but I wasn't complaining. At least one room in this place was comfortable. I started spending more time down there, set up a folding chair, brought my laptop down to work. It was the only place I could sit without wearing 3 layers. After about a week, I noticed something else. Upstairs, my breath fogged when I exhaled. Every room, even with the space heaters running. I could see my breath in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in my bedroom at night. It was that cold. But in the basement, nothing. No fog, just warm, comfortable air. I mentioned it to my coworker, Dave, when he came over to help me move some furniture. "That's bizarre," he said. We were standing at the top of the basement stairs, both of us watching our breath fog in the hallway. "Go down and check." I went down the stairs, called up to him. "Nothing. Can't see my breath at all." "Dude, that's not normal. You should call your landlord." But I didn't want to. The landlord was already annoyed that I kept asking him to fix things. The leaky faucet, the broken window latch, the outlet that sparked. I didn't want to complain about the one part of the house that actually felt good. 3 weeks in, I was doing laundry in the basement. The washer and dryer were down there, tucked in a corner behind a partial wall that created a little alcove. I was moving clothes from the washer to the dryer when I saw it. Behind the dryer, shoved against the wall where you wouldn't see it unless you were right on top of it, a mattress. Not an old abandoned mattress left by a previous tenant, a relatively new one, twin-sized with a fitted sheet still on it, and next to it a pillow, a blanket folded at the foot. My heart started pounding. I pulled the dryer out a few inches to get a better look. There were other things back there. A plastic water bottle, half full, a granola bar wrapper, a book, a paperback thriller, spine cracked like someone had been reading it. None of this stuff had been there when I moved in. I'd been down here dozens of times. I would have noticed a mattress. I pulled out my phone, turned on the recording app, and looked closer. The concrete floor around the mattress was clean, not dusty like the rest of the basement, like someone had swept it recently. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. Someone had been down here. Someone had set up a place to sleep. But when? I was home most of the time. I would have heard someone coming in. Unless they came in when I was asleep. Or unless they never left. I ran upstairs and checked every lock, every window. Everything was secure. No signs of forced entry. I checked the basement door. It didn't have a lock, just a handle. Anyone could open it from either side. That night, I shoved a chair under the basement doorknob before I went to bed. Barely slept. Every sound made me jump. The house settling, the wind outside, the space heater clicking on and off. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something that made me sit up straight in bed. Footsteps. In the basement. Not the slow creak of an old house settling. Actual footsteps. Someone walking across the concrete floor, deliberately, not trying to be quiet. I grabbed my phone, turned on the recording app, and crept out of my bedroom. The basement door was still shut, chair still wedged under the handle. The footsteps continued, pacing back and forth. Then they stopped. For maybe 30 seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard them again, on the stairs, coming up, fast. The doorknob rattled violently. The chair held, but the door shook in its frame. I ran, didn't even think about it, grabbed my keys and my coat and ran straight out the front door into the freezing night, got in my car and drove to a gas station 3 blocks away. I called the police from the parking lot. They met me at the house 20 minutes later, 2 officers.
They searched the entire place, top to bottom, basement included. No one there. But they found the mattress, found the water bottle, the book, the granola bar wrapper, found something else too. A gap in the foundation wall behind some boxes, partially hidden, big enough for a person to squeeze through. It led to a crawl space that connected to the neighbor's yard. The officer told me someone had definitely been living down there, probably coming and going through that gap. They'd set up camp, maybe been there for weeks. Why the basement? I asked. Why not just break in and use the whole house? The officer looked at me. Because it's warm down there. If you're homeless in January and you find a warm place to sleep, you stay. But there's no heat source. Why is it warm? He shrugged. Old houses are weird. Ground temperature, insulation, who knows? They boarded up the gap that night, put a proper lock on the basement door, told me to call if I noticed anything else. I stayed at a friend's place for 2 days. When I finally went back, I made myself go down to the basement in daylight. The mattress was gone. Police had taken it as evidence. The space behind the dryer was empty. I put my hand on the concrete wall. Still warm. I moved out at the end of the month, broke my lease, lost my deposit, didn't care. Before I left, I asked the landlord about the heating situation, asked if he knew why the basement was always so warm. He looked confused. Warm? That basement was always freezing. I had to wear a coat every time I went down there to check the furnace. It was warm the whole time I was there. The warmest room in the house. He shook his head. That doesn't make sense. There's no heat source down there. I didn't argue, just handed him my keys and left. Last month, I drove by the house. There's a new tenant there now. I could see them through the window, sitting in the living room with the lights on. And I wondered if they'd noticed yet. If they'd felt that warm air coming up from the basement. If they'd gone down to investigate. If they ever would.
I've lived alone for 3 years now, ever since my ex moved out. It's a small one-bedroom in a quiet complex. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I work from home most days, so I'm here a lot. I know every sound this place makes. The pipes knocking when the upstairs neighbor showers, the fridge humming at 2 a.m., the way the floorboards creak near the bathroom. So when I walked into my bedroom last Tuesday and saw my laundry folded on the bed, I knew something was wrong. I'd thrown a load in the dryer that morning, just some t-shirts and jeans, nothing special. I was on a work call when the dryer finished, heard it buzz from the other room, but I was in the middle of a presentation, so I figured I'd grab it later. The call ran long, almost 2 hours. When I finally went to get my clothes, they weren't in the dryer. They were on my bed. Folded. Not just tossed there, actually folded. Shirts in neat rectangles, jeans folded in half with the seams lined up. The way my mom used to do it when I was a kid, not the lazy fold I usually do where everything's just good enough to shove in a drawer. I stood in the doorway for a solid minute just staring. I live alone. My doors were locked. My building's secure. You need a key fob just to get into the lobby. No one has a key to my apartment except the building manager, and he'd have to give 24 hours notice to come in. I checked every room, every closet, even behind the shower curtain. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no windows open, everything exactly as I'd left it. I told myself I'd folded them and forgot. Maybe I'd grabbed them during the call without thinking, folded them on autopilot while I was talking. It was stupid, but it was the only explanation that made sense. But I knew I hadn't. I remembered hearing that dryer buzz and thinking, I'll get that later. I tried to shake it off, went back to work, answered some emails, ordered dinner, but the whole thing sat wrong with me. That night, I barely slept, kept getting up to check the locks, looking around like I'd see someone standing in the corner. Nothing happened for 2 days. I almost convinced myself I was losing it. Then, on Friday, I did another load of laundry. This time, I made a point of it, set a timer on my phone, stood right there when the dryer finished. I pulled out every piece myself and dumped it all on the bed in a wrinkled pile. Then I went to make coffee. Couldn't have been gone more than 5 minutes. When I came back, the clothes were in my dresser. Not on the bed, in the dresser. Drawers were open, clothes put away, but they were in the wrong places. Socks in the shirt drawer, shirts where my pants should be, everything mixed up like someone who didn't know my system had tried to help. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my coffee mug. I called the building manager. "Did anyone access my apartment today?" "No. Why? Is everything okay?" "Are you sure? Maintenance, pest control, anyone?" "No, one. I'd have called you first. What's going on?" I couldn't explain it. Told him I thought I'd left my door unlocked and got paranoid. He offered to come check my locks, but I said no. What was he going to find? That night, I set up my laptop in the hallway with the webcam pointed at my bedroom door. If someone was getting in, I'd catch them. I did a small load on Sunday, just a few towels. Sat in the living room with my laptop, watching the feed, waiting for the dryer to finish. The dryer buzzed. On the webcam, my bedroom door stayed closed. No one went in. I got up, walked down the hall, opened my bedroom door. The towels were folded on my bed, still warm. Not just warm, damp warm, like someone had just pulled them out seconds ago, body heat still in the fabric. I touched one. It was almost hot. My bedroom door had never opened. I'd been watching. I grabbed the towels and threw them on the floor, backed out of the room and slammed the door, stood in my living room trying to breathe, trying to think. Then I heard it. The dryer. Running. I crept back toward my bedroom. The sound was definitely coming from there, that low mechanical rumble, the slight squeak the drum makes when it rotates. I opened the door slowly. The dryer was on, the dial set to high heat, the little light inside glowing. It was empty. I'd just taken the last load out. I yanked open the dryer door to turn it off. It wouldn't open. I pulled harder. The handle moved, but the door stayed shut, like something was holding it from inside. Then the dryer stopped. Just stopped. The drum went still, the light clicked off, and the door popped open on its own. Inside was one of my t-shirts, folded, still warm. I hadn't put anything in there. I'm writing this from a hotel. I went back yesterday with 2 friends to grab some essentials. The dryer was off, door hanging open, everything looked normal. But in the lint trap, we found something. Hair. Long, dark hair, way too much of it to have come from my clothes. And it was still damp. I called the landlord this morning to break my lease. He asked why. I told him I got a job in another city. He said that's fine, but I'd lose my deposit. I don't care. I'm not going back. Last night, the building manager texted me. Said maintenance went in to check on things. Everything is fine, he said, but he wanted to know, had I bought a new dryer recently? I told him no, I don't own the dryer. It came with the apartment. He sent back, "That's what I thought, because the one in your unit now is a different model than what we have on file. Same brand, but newer. We're trying to figure out when it got switched." I haven't responded. I don't want to know when it got switched, or why someone would break in just to leave me a better dryer.